the air in the grand ballroom thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition, crackled with energy. On stage, Julian Vance, a titan of industry, was celebrating his crowning achievement. But it wasn't the skyscraper he was unveiling that held the city captive. It was the woman whose arm he held her fingers intertwined with his. Her name was Isabella, his brilliant protégée, and her triumphant smile was a dagger in the heart of a silent watcher. But the real story wasn't on the stage. It was about to walk through the ballroom doors holding an object of myth and power, a family seal that could build empires or, on a night like this, burn one to the ground. Elara Vance believed in structure. As one of New York's most sought-after architects, she understood that the most beautiful facades often concealed the most complex and sometimes compromised foundations. Her own life was a testament to this principle. To the outside world, she was the elegant, intelligent wife of Julian Vance, the visionary CEO of Vance Holdings. Their life was a blueprint of success, a sprawling Manhattan penthouse overlooking Central Park. Two bright children, Liam and Sophia, at an elite private school, and a philanthropic presence that made them the darlings of the city's upper crust. Their marriage, once a passionate joint venture, had slowly been renovated into a polite, functional partnership. The late-night conversations about art and ambition had been replaced by shared calendars and brief logistical check-ins. Julian, once her confidant, had become a man she admired from a distance, a brilliant comet streaking across the business world. He was consumed by his latest project, the Meridian Tower, a gleaming, audacious skyscraper that would forever alter the New York skyline. It was his legacy, he said. Their legacy. But Elara saw the hairline fractures. They appeared in the form of late nights he claimed were spent at the office, but his shoes were oddly clean for a man supposedly visiting a construction site. They were in the hushed phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, the scent of a perfume not her own, lingering faintly on his jacket. He was a master builder, but he had grown careless in constructing his lies. The name that haunted these fractures was Isabella Rossi. Young, fiercely intelligent, and ravenously ambitious. Isabella was Julian's head of global strategy. He had discovered her, mentored her, and now it seemed he adored her. Elara had watched them together at company functions. She saw the way Isabella looked at him, a mixture of hero worship and proprietary hunger. She saw the way Julian's eyes would soften, a warmth reserved only for Isabella, now a warmth Elara herself hadn't felt in years. Elara was not a fool. She didn't confront him. A public scene was not her style. It was messy, unstructured, and would achieve nothing but her own humiliation. Instead, she began her own quiet project of emotional excavation. While Julian was building his monument of glass and steel, Elara was uncovering the decaying framework of their marriage. She did it with the same meticulous precision she applied to her architectural designs. She noted dates, times, and discrepancies. She spoke to her lawyer, a discreet man named Marcus Thorne, under the guise of estate planning. The true foundation of their union wasn't love, not anymore. It was the Vance legacy. The Vance family wasn't just wealthy. They were a dynasty built over a century. And at the heart of that dynasty was a tangible piece of its history, the Vance family seal. It was not a mere trinket. It was a hefty, ornate signet made of gold and lapis lazuli, bearing the family crest, a lone wolf staring at a northern star. For generations it had been passed down, but its significance was more than ceremonial. Julian's great-grandfather, a shrewd and distrustful patriarch, had woven its power into the very legal DNA of the company. A clause buried deep within the bylaws of Vance Holdings stipulated that the holder of the seal, traditionally the spouse of the CEO, the guardian of the family's heart, had the deciding vote in any emergency meeting concerning the removal of the chairman of the board. It was a relic of a bygone era, a moral emergency clause designed to protect the company from a leader who brought disgrace upon the family name. Julian, in his modern arrogance, had dismissed it as sentimental nonsense. "It's a beautiful piece of history, darling," he'd told Elara on their wedding day as he placed the heavy velvet-lined box in her hands. "A symbol of you being the soul of this family." Elara, however, had read the bylaws. She understood its true purpose. It wasn't a symbol of the soul. It was a weapon for the mind. For the past year, as Julian's affair with Isabella became an open secret, whispered at dinner parties, she wasn't invited to the seal had sat in a safe in her private study. She would often take it out, the cold, heavy gold, a stark contrast to the hollow ache in her chest. She wasn't just a wife. She was a custodian, and she was beginning to understand that some structures were not meant to be saved, but to be demolished to make way for something stronger. The invitation to the Meridian Tower Gala arrived on a crisp October morning. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock, the ink a shimmering gold. It was a celebration of Julian's triumph. Elara looked at it, her reflection faintly visible in the glossy finish. She knew Isabella would be there, not as a guest, but as a queen in waiting. And she knew, with the chilling certainty of a perfect calculation, that this was the night the foundation would finally give way. She went to her study, opened the safe, and took out the box. The time for silent observation was over. It was time for a new design. The weeks leading up to the gala were a masterclass in deception. Julian was effusively attentive, a man trying to shore up a crumbling wall with a fresh coat of paint. He brought her flowers, praised her latest design award, and spoke animatedly about how the gala would be a night for them, a testament to their partnership. "You are my foundation, Elara," he said one evening, his hand covering hers across the vast expanse of their mahogany dining table. His touch felt foreign, a trespass. "None of this," he gestured vaguely at the opulent room, "the tower, the company. None of it would be stable without you." Elara smiled, a placid architectural curve of her lips that didn't reach her eyes. "I'm so proud of you, Julian." She had learned to speak his language, a dialect of half-truths and grand pronouncements. Inside, she was a whirlwind of cold fury and methodical planning. Her days were a study in duality. In the mornings, she was Elara Vance, mother and wife, discussing school projects with Liam and Sophia, approving menus with the household staff. In the afternoons, she became a forensic accountant of her own life. With Marcus Thorne's guidance, she delved into the corporate structure of Vance Holdings. She traced Julian's spending, noting the lavish business expenses at five-star hotels where no conferences were held, the jewelry purchases from Cartier, that she never received the lease on a private apartment in Soho under a subsidiary's name. The apartment was Isabella's. Elara knew it instinctively. She hired a discreet private investigator, a former detective named David Chen, a man who specialized in the quiet implosions of the wealthy. He didn't provide salacious photos. Elara had no need for them. She needed data, financial entanglements, proof of recklessness that went beyond infidelity and crossed into corporate malfeasance. Chen's report was delivered in a plain manila envelope. It was worse than she had imagined. Julian hadn't just bought Isabella gifts. He had made her a partner in a shell corporation, diverting company funds to purchase art for the Meridian Tower's lobby art that was wildly overvalued and sourced from a gallery co-owned by Isabella's cousin. He had fast-tracked her for stock options, far exceeding her role, citing performance metrics that were clearly fabricated. He wasn't just having an affair. He was compromising the company. He was putting their children's legacy at risk for his infatuation. The report was the final piece of her blueprint. The betrayal wasn't just emotional. It was a structural failure that threatened the entire Vance empire. Her resolve hardened from a shield into a sword. This was no longer about a broken heart. It was about protecting her family and a 100-year-old legacy from the man who was supposed to be its guardian. The night before the gala, Julian came home late. He smelled of wine and Isabella's signature Chanel No. 5. He found Elara in her study, sketching at her drafting table. The box containing the Vance seal sat on the corner of the desk, closed. "Working late?" he asked, trying for a casual tone. "Just finalizing a design," she replied, her voice calm, her hand steady as she drew a perfectly straight line. Sometimes you have to see the whole structure before you can be sure of the details. He came up behind her, placing his hands on her shoulders. His touch was meant to be reassuring, but it felt like a weight. "Tomorrow night, the whole world will see what we've built." Elara paused her sketching. She looked at the intricate design on the paper, a complex facade for a new museum. "Yes," she said softly. Her eyes focused on the lines. "They will." He kissed the top of her head and left oblivious. He saw a wife, a partner, an accessory to his success. He did not see the strategist who had already mapped his downfall. Alone, Elara opened the box. The gold of the wolf and the deep blue of the lapis lazuli seemed to absorb the light in the room. It felt heavier than ever, not with the weight of the past, but with the gravity of the future. She closed the lid with a soft, final click. The Meridian Tower Gala was the heart of the city that night. The venue was a custom-built pavilion at the base of the tower itself, a cathedral of glass and light, offering the assembled guests a breathtaking view of Julian's creation as it speared the night sky. Limousines deposited figures of immense wealth and influence onto a red carpet, swarming with photographers. The air hummed with the electric buzz of power, a symphony of hushed, deal-making air kisses, and the clinking of champagne flutes. Elara had chosen her attire with the precision of a general selecting armor. She wore a bespoke gown by a minimalist designer, a column of deep emerald silk that was elegant, severe, and utterly commanding. It was not a dress that sought to entice. It was a dress that declared its presence. Her dark hair was swept back in a chignon, showcasing a pair of diamond earrings, a Vance heirloom from Julian's grandmother. They were her only concession to the role of the CEO's wife. She arrived deliberately late and alone. Her driver, a man who had been with the family for 20 years, simply nodded as he opened her door, his expression one of quiet loyalty. Her entrance caused a ripple of whispers. The society columns had been speculating for months about the state of the Vance marriage. Her solitary arrival was a statement. Julian, holding court near the stage, saw her immediately. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face, quickly masked by a brilliant smile as he excused himself and strode towards her. "Darling, you're here. You look magnificent," he said, kissing her cheek. The gesture was for the cameras a piece of public theatre. "I was getting worried." "There was no need to worry, Julian. I wouldn't miss your big night," she replied, her voice cool and even. She allowed him to take her arm and lead her into the throng, playing her part. She endured the parade of pleasantries. The mayor, the governor-rival developers who clapped Julian on the back with envy-laced congratulations. Through it all, she was acutely aware of Isabella Rossi, circling them like a shark. Isabella was a vision in crimson, a stark, passionate contrast to Ilara's cool emerald. She was never far from Julian's side, interjecting with a brilliant strategic point, laughing at his jokes with an intimacy that was brazen. She was marking her territory. Several times Ilara saw them exchange glances over the heads of the crowd, glances that were conspiratorial, possessive and utterly dismissive of her own presence. They were so confident in their private world that they had forgotten it existed within a larger one she still commanded. An old family friend, a formidable matriarch named Beatrice Fairchild, squeezed Ilara's arm. "You have the patience of a saint, my dear," she murmured, her sharp eyes flicking towards Isabella. Ilara gave a small, enigmatic smile. "Patience is a strategic asset, Beatrice." The lights dimmed, signaling the start of the formal presentation. A hush fell over the crowd as a slickly produced video played showcasing the tower's construction in a dramatic time-lapse set to a soaring orchestral score. It was a monument to Julian's ego, and the crowd loved it. Finally, Julian took the stage to a thunderous ovation. He was a master showman, radiating charm and power. He spoke of vision, of legacy, of building the future. Ilara watched from a front-row table, her expression unreadable, a marble sculpture amidst a sea of adoring faces. A project of this magnitude is never the work of one man. Julian boomed, his voice resonating with practiced humility. It takes a team of brilliant, dedicated people. And there is one person whose strategic vision, whose relentless drive has been the true engine behind the Meridian. She is not just my head of strategy. She is my partner in shaping the future of this company. A knot tightened in Ilara's stomach. She knew what was coming. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the incomparable Isabella Rossi. The applause was polite, but tinged with confusion as Isabella ascended the stage. She walked not to the secondary podium, but directly to Julian's side. He beamed, his face alight with an unguarded adoration that he hadn't shown Ilara in a decade. In a gesture that shattered every remaining shard of public decorum, he took her hand, raised it to his lips for a brief kiss, and then held it firmly, turning to face the audience with her. For a moment, there was only the sound of 1,000 camera shutters firing in rapid succession. The flashes were like lightning, illuminating the tableau on stage, the triumphant man, the radiant mistress, and the unspoken declaration of a new reign. It was a coup executed in the brightest of spotlights. Isabella, glowing with victory, leaned into the microphone. "Julian is too modest," she began, her voice smooth as velvet. His vision wasn't just about building a tower. It was about building a new kind of legacy, one unburdened by the past and focused solely on the future. I am honored to be a part of his future. The subtext was a sledgehammer, unburdened by the past. She was talking about Ilara. Down at the front table, time seemed to slow for Ilara. She could feel hundreds of pairs of eyes darting between her and the stage. They were looking for the reaction. They expected tears, a hasty, humiliated exit. They expected the woman scorned. The air grew thick with a collective, voyeuristic pity. The whispers started quiet at first, then growing into a low, pervasive hum of scandal. "Did you see that? Right in front of his wife. How could he?" She's pure class. This is career suicide. Elara did not move. She kept her chin straight, her gaze fixed on the stage. She watched as Julian put his arm around Isabella's waist, a gesture of ownership and pride. He was so blinded by his own brilliance, so insulated by his success, that he believed he was untouchable. He believed he could rewrite the rules, not just of real estate, but of honor, of family, of loyalty. He had forgotten that foundations, even those of glass and steel, rely on principles far older than any modern blueprint. She felt nothing. The pain, the rage, the grief. She had processed those emotions in the silent solitude of her study over the past year. What remained was a cold, clear purpose. This public humiliation was not her defeat. It was his. He had just handed her the very thing she needed, a public, undeniable act of disgrace. He had invoked the spirit, if not the letter, of the moral emergency clause. On stage, Julian raised their joined hands. "To the meridian!" he shouted. "To the future!" Isabella echoed. The applause that followed was scattered, uncertain. The celebratory mood had evaporated, replaced by the thrilling, uncomfortable tension of a public immolation. Julian and Isabella seemed oblivious, lost in their shared moment of triumph, a two-person kingdom on a brightly lit stage. Elara waited for the applause to die down. She picked up her evening bag from the table. It was a simple, elegant clutch, but it felt as heavy as a briefcase. Inside, nestled in silk lining, was the Vance family seal. She stood up. Her movement was unhurried, graceful, and it captured the attention of everyone nearby. The whispers ceased. One by one, heads turned in her direction. A path began to clear for her, as if by an invisible force. The city's most powerful people parted before her. Her heels made a soft, rhythmic click on the polished marble floor, the only sound in a suddenly cavernous silence. She was not walking away. She was walking towards the stage. Every eye in the room was on Elara as she approached the stage. The spotlights meant for Julian and Isabella seemed to find her tracing her deliberate, inexorable path. On stage, Julian's triumphant smile faltered. He saw her coming, saw the unnerving calm in her eyes, and a flicker of unease, then alarm, crossed his face. Isabella's grip on his arm tightened, her victorious expression hardening into one of defiant possession. Elara didn't look at the audience. Her gaze was locked on her husband. She reached the short set of stairs at the side of the stage and ascended them with the same measured grace. When she reached the podium, she stood not beside Julian, but directly in front of him, creating a triangle of tension that was palpable throughout the ballroom. The silence was now absolute, heavy, and expectant. "A beautiful speech, Julian," Elara said, her voice perfectly modulated, carrying through the microphone without a tremor. "You spoke of legacy. It's a word you use often." Julian forced a tight, dismissive laugh. "Elara, this isn't the time or the place." "On the contrary," she replied, her voice dropping slightly, drawing the entire room in. "I can think of no better place to discuss the Vance legacy than here in front of the monument you've built to it." She turned her head slightly, her eyes sweeping over Isabella for the first time. It was not a look of hatred or jealousy, but one of clinical assessment, as if observing a curious but ultimately insignificant specimen. "And no better time than when you are sharing the stage with your partner in shaping the future." The sarcasm was subtle, a razor blade wrapped in silk. Isabella flinched. Elara then turned her attention back to the audience. For over a century, The Vance family has been guided by two things: bold vision and unwavering integrity. One without the other is not progress. It is recklessness. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. From her evening bag, she withdrew the Vance family seal. It was larger and more substantial than a simple ring. She held it in her palm, the stage lights glinting off the polished gold and the deep blue of the lapis. It looked ancient, powerful, a piece of forgotten royalty. A gasp rippled through the older members of the crowd, those who knew the family's history. Beatrice Fairchild leaned forward in her seat, her eyes wide. "Most of you see this as a family heirloom." Elara continued, her voice resonating with a newfound authority. "Julian once told me it was a symbol of my role as the soul of the family. It is a lovely sentiment. It is also incorrect." She held the seal up for all to see. "This is not just a symbol. According to the founding bylaws of Vance Holdings, bylaws drafted by a patriarch who understood that character was the ultimate collateral, this seal is an instrument of corporate governance." Julian's face had gone pale. "Elara, stop this," he hissed, taking a step toward her. She held up a hand, and he froze. It was a simple gesture, yet it held the force of an iron gate slamming shut. "Article 9, Section 4. Elara announced, her voice as clear as a bell. "In the event of a moral emergency, defined as any public action by the chairman that brings profound and undeniable disgrace upon the family name, and thereby threatens the stability and reputation of the corporation, the designated holder of the family seal is granted the authority to call an emergency session of the board. And at that session," she let her eyes meet Julian's, "the holder of this seal casts the deciding vote on the chairman's fitness to lead." The silence in the room was shattered by a cacophony of frantic murmurs. Reporters were scribbling furiously. Lawyers were exchanging shocked glances. This wasn't a marital spat. This was a boardroom assassination. "You are confusing a sentimental tradition with corporate law." Julian stammered, his bravado crumbling. "Am I?" Elara's smile was chilling. "Marcus Thorne of Sullivan and Cromwell reviewed the charter this afternoon. He confirmed its validity. Perhaps you should have read the fine print of your own legacy, Julian." She took a step closer to him, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet every word was picked up by the microphone. "You stand here tonight and speak of the future while publicly dishonoring the woman who is the legal guardian of your family's past and your children's future. You have confused your ego with an empire. You have compromised this company with your recklessness both personally and financially." She then looked out at the sea of stunned faces, her gaze sweeping across the board members who were present. "Consider this my formal invocation of Article 9, Section 4. An emergency board meeting will be convened tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I trust you will all be there." With that, she placed the Vance family seal deliberately on the podium, the heavy thud echoing like a gavel. She gave Julian one last lingering look, not of anger, but of pity. Then, without a backward glance at him or the woman clinging to his arm, she turned and walked off the stage. The silence held for a moment longer before the room erupted into absolute chaos. Elara Vance did not run. She walked head held high through the pandemonium she had unleashed, the architect of a demolition so precise no one had seen it coming. The chaos of the gala was merely the overture. The real battle would be fought not in the court of public opinion, but in the sterile, sound-proofed boardroom on the 80th floor of the old Vance Tower. Elara knew that her public gambit was just that, an opening move. Julian was cornered, but not defeated. He was charismatic, ruthless, and he had spent years cultivating loyalty among the board members, men and women who owed their careers to him. She had the law on her side, but power is rarely so straightforward. She didn't go home. The penthouse felt tainted a stage for a different kind of performance. Instead, she had her driver take her to the Carlisle, where she had booked a suite under her maiden name, Ilara Thorne. A small act of reclaiming her own identity. She spent less than an hour there, changing from her emerald gown into a sharply tailored navy blue suit. Then she made a call. Her destination was a place of old power, a Georgian mansion in the quiet hills of Westchester County. It was the home of Arthur Vance Sr., Julian's father, and the retired patriarch of the empire. Arthur was a relic of a different era, a gruff, formidable man who believed in honor, tradition, and the sanctity of the Vance name above all else. He had been fond of Ilara in a distant paternal way, but he worshipped his son. Convincing him would be like moving a mountain. She found him in his library, a vast room of dark wood and leather, a portrait of his own stern father glowering down from above the marble fireplace. He was nursing a brandy, the news from the gala having already reached him. "You've made a terrible mess, Ilara," he said, his voice a low rumble. He didn't ask her to sit. "No, Arthur," she replied, her voice firm, refusing to be intimidated. "Julian made a mess. I have simply begun the process of cleaning it up. You humiliated my son. You humiliated this family in front of the entire city. Your son did that when he chose to publicly discard his wife and flaunt his mistress on a stage bearing our family name." She countered her calm, unwavering. "He did it when he used company funds to finance his affair. He did it when he valued his ego more than a century of Vance integrity." She walked to the large oak desk and placed a slim leather-bound folio upon it. It was David Chen's report, condensed and annotated by her lawyers. "This is not about infidelity, Arthur. This is about fitness to lead. Read it. It details the shell corporations, the fraudulent art purchases, the compromised stock options. He has exposed this company to shareholder lawsuits and a media firestorm that will cripple the stock price by morning." Arthur stared at the folio, then back at her. His eyes narrowed. "He is my son. He built the Meridian. He built it with Vance money and Vance resources." Ilara said, her voice softening slightly, shifting from accusation to strategy. "He is a brilliant builder. I have never denied that. But he has forgotten what the name on that tower truly represents. It represents you. It represents his grandfather. It represents my children, Liam and Sophia." The mention of his grandchildren, the future of the line, was the first chink in his armor. He finally gestured to a chair. "What do you want, Ilara? I want to save the company," she said simply. "Julian is compromised. His judgment is clouded. When the market opens, our competitors will smell blood in the water. We need to project strength, stability. We need a new leader immediately." "And I suppose you think that should be you?" he scoffed. "No," Ilara said, and this surprised him. "That would be seen as a vengeful coup. Too messy. We need a steady hand. Someone the board and the street will respect without question. Someone who represents continuity and tradition." She paused, letting her words sink in. "I think it should be you." Arthur stared at her, genuinely stunned. He had been retired for 10 years. "You resume your role as interim chairman," Ilara explained, laying out her plan. "Your presence will calm the markets. It shows the old guard is back in control. I will take a seat on the board, as is my right by marriage, and as a significant shareholder in my children's trust. I will oversee a special committee on corporate governance to undo the damage Julian has done. We will present a united front, a family protecting its legacy." He was silent for a long time, swirling the brandy in his glass, the gears of his formidable mind turning. He was a proud man, and Julian's public behavior was a deep stain on his own name. Elara hadn't come to him as a crying, betrayed wife. She had come as a strategist, offering him a path back to power and a way to salvage the family's honor. She had appealed not to his heart, but to his most sacred value, the legacy. "He will fight you," Arthur said finally. "He will fight us both." "Yes, he will," Elara agreed. "He will call in every favor, but he is leading with emotion and arrogance. We will lead with facts and with the full weight of the Vance name. With your support and the evidence in that folio, the board will have no choice. They must choose between a compromised visionary and the patriarch who built the company into what it is today." She stood to leave. "The meeting is at 9. The seal gives me the deciding vote in a tie. With you it won't be a tie. It will be an abdication." Arthur looked from the folio on his desk to the powerful portrait of his father. He saw the same steely resolve in the eyes of his daughter-in-law. He slowly, deliberately stood up. "I will be there," he said. Elara nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of their new, fragile alliance. As she left the quiet mansion and stepped back into the cool night air, she knew she had secured her most powerful piece. The kingdom was gathering. The 80-story climb in the private elevator was a journey through a column of silence. Elara stood perfectly still, her reflection a stark silhouette against the polished chrome walls. She was ascending into the heart of the empire she had helped build, to the place where Julian was king. But today, she was not coming as his queen. She was coming as the executor of a long-dormant law, an instrument of a justice he had long since forgotten. The boardroom on the 80th floor was designed to intimidate. It was a masterpiece of corporate power, a long, cavernous space encased in floor-to-ceiling glass that offered a godlike panorama of Manhattan. The city sprawled below a toy set of ambition and dreams, humbled by the viewer's sheer altitude. In the center of the room sat a vast, monolithic table of polished black obsidian, so reflective it seemed to hold a darker, colder version of the sky above. 12 high-backed leather chairs were arranged around it, thrones for the titans of industry. Elara was the first to arrive. Punctuality, like patience, was a strategic asset. She wanted to occupy the space to let it become hers before the battle began. She walked the length of the room, her footsteps silent on the plush, charcoal-grey carpet. She didn't take a seat at either end of the table, the traditional seats of power, but chose a chair at the very center of its long side. It was a deliberate choice. She was not here to seize the throne, but to act as the fulcrum upon which the entire structure would pivot. On the gleaming obsidian surface, she placed 2 objects, the slim, lethal folio of evidence, and beside it, the Vance family seal. The ancient gold and lapis lazuli looked almost alien in the hyper-modern setting, a piece of old-world magic amidst cold, hard commerce. The board members began to file in a collection of men and women who collectively controlled billions of dollars. They entered in hushed tones, the usual back-slapping camaraderie entirely absent. The air was thick with the news from the gala. They saw Elara, a solitary, composed figure, and their reactions were telling. Robert Caldwell, the company's lead counsel, and a man whose loyalty to Julian was legend, gave her a curt, dismissive nod before taking the seat to the right of the chairman's empty chair. Eleanor Hayes, a sharp woman in her late 60s, who had served on the board alongside Arthur Vance for 2 decades, offered Elara a look of grim, sympathetic respect. Ben Carter, the youngest board member, a tech wunderkind who valued data above all else, simply observed her with an unreadable, analytical gaze. Julian arrived 5 minutes late, a calculated power move that fell flat in the tense atmosphere. He strode in, attempting an air of defiant bravado. He was immaculately dressed, but the dark circles under his eyes and the slight tremor in his hand as he placed his briefcase on the table betrayed a sleepless night. He ignored Elara completely, instead greeting Caldwell and a few other allies with a forced warmth that didn't reach his eyes. His gaze, however, kept flicking toward the seal on the table as if it were a venomous snake. The final arrival silenced the room. Arthur Vance, Sr., entered his presence, sucking the remaining oxygen from the air. He didn't look like a retired man. He looked like a king returning from exile. His face was set like granite, and his cold blue eyes, so like his son's, yet so much harder, swept across the room. He gave Elara a single, almost imperceptible nod of acknowledgement before taking the seat at the opposite head of the table from his son. The message was clear. The family was divided, and the patriarch had chosen his side. Robert Caldwell, acting as Julian's proxy, called the meeting to order. His voice was smooth, but laced with aggression. "We are convened today under the dubious invocation of a little-known and frankly archaic clause by Mrs. Elara Vance. Before we proceed, I want to state for the record that it is the position of the chairman that this is a gross misuse of corporate procedure, an attempt to leverage a domestic dispute. My husband's affair is indeed a domestic dispute, Robert." Elara's voice cut through his calm and sharp as shattered glass. Everyone turned to her. She had not raised her voice yet. She commanded the room. "However, I did not invoke Article 9 because my husband was unfaithful. I invoked it because the chairman of Vance Holdings has become a liability to this corporation." She opened the folio. "I am not here today as a scorned wife. I am here as a custodian of this family's legacy, and more importantly, as a protector of shareholder value. The moral emergency I cited is not a matter of the heart. It is a matter of the balance sheet." Her professionalism was a bucket of ice water on the simmering drama. This was a language the board understood. Julian finally spoke, his voice tight with fury. "This is absurd. Elara, you are an architect. You know nothing of the complexities of corporate finance." "I know how to read a ledger, Julian," she replied without looking at him, her attention focused on the board members. "And I know fraud when I see it." She proceeded with the dispassionate precision of a surgeon to lay out her case. She didn't make accusations. She presented facts. She slid copies of bank statements, property leases, and internal expense reports across the table. "Exhibit A," she began. "A lease agreement for a luxury apartment in Soho, paid for over the last 18 months, not by Julian Vance personally, but by a subsidiary of Vance Holdings under the budget code for off-site project development. Total expenditure $450,000. The sole resident of that apartment, Ms. Isabella Rossi." She continued, her voice never wavering. "Exhibit B, a series of transactions funneling over $3 million to a shell corporation named Rossi International Art. This money was earmarked for the procurement of lobby art for the Meridian. The director of this corporation is a Mr. Marco Rossi, Isabella Rossi's first cousin, an independent appraisal of the art purchased. She slid a new document forward, values it at less than $500,000. Where Julian did the other $2.5 million go?" A wave of shock rippled through the room. This was no longer about a mistress. This was embezzlement, plain and simple. And finally, Exhibit C. Elara said, her voice dropping slightly. An executive review signed by Julian, authorizing a grant of backdated stock options to Ms. Rossi, citing her singular and unprecedented contributions to the Meridian project. Contributions so singular, they warranted a compensation package triple that of our head of engineering, a man with 30 years of experience. These options have diluted the value of every share held by everyone in this room, and every public shareholder we are sworn to protect. She sat back, her presentation finished. She had laid the foundation of his downfall brick by evidentiary brick. Julian was ashen-faced. He looked cornered, a predator suddenly finding himself in a cage. "This is creative accounting," he stammered, looking at his allies for support. "The cost of doing business on a project of this scale, every great man has his expenses. Look at the tower we built. It will generate billions in revenue. This is a rounding error. A rounding error." It was Eleanor Hayes who spoke, her voice laced with icy contempt. "We are not the Medici court, Julian. We are a publicly traded company with a fiduciary duty. What you call expenses, the SEC would call wire fraud." Ben Carter, the pragmatist, leaned forward. "Forget the SEC for a moment. The reputational risk is catastrophic. When this leaks, and it will leak, our stock will plummet. We'll be buried in shareholder lawsuits for years. Your indiscretion," he said the word distastefully, "is no longer a personal matter. It's a multi-billion-dollar crisis." Julian, desperate, turned on Elara. "Look at her. This is nothing but a vengeful fantasy. She's been planning this, trying to destroy me because she couldn't keep me." The personal attack hung in the air, ugly and raw. Before Elara could respond, Arthur Vance, Sr., spoke for the first time. His voice was low, heavy, and filled with a terrible, weary sadness. "Enough, Julian." The two words fell like boulders into the room. "When I handed this company to you," Arthur continued, his eyes locked on his son, "I gave you one piece of advice. I told you that any man can build something tall, but it takes a man of character to build something that lasts. The Vance name is not just a brand on a building. It is supposed to be a guarantee of integrity. A bond. You have taken that bond, that sacred trust we have built over a century, and you have sold it off cheap to finance your sordid little affair." He gestured toward Elara. "You speak of her as if she is the enemy. This woman has raised your children. She has stood by your side with a grace you have never deserved. And today she has shown more courage and more concern for the future of this company than you have in the past 2 years. You did not just betray your wife, son. You betrayed your name. You betrayed me." The condemnation from his father broke something in Julian. The rage and defiance drained away, leaving behind a hollow, desperate man. Robert Caldwell, seeing the battle was lost, tried to salvage the situation. A vote for removal would be an admission of guilt. It would create chaos. "The chaos has already been created, Robert," Elara said calmly. "What we are doing now is restoring order." Caldwell grimaced. "Then we must call the vote. The motion on the floor invoked by Mrs. Vance is for the temporary removal of Julian Vance as chairman of the board, pending a full internal and external investigation. We will vote in order of seniority." He looked directly at Eleanor Hayes, the most senior member after Arthur. "Aye," Eleanor said instantly, her voice clear. The vote went around the table. 2 of Julian's staunchest allies, men he'd brought onto the board himself, voted nay, their voices weak. The others were a cascade of ayes, each one a nail in Julian's coffin. It came down to the final 2 members, before Caldwell and Julian himself. The vote stood at 4 for removal, 3 against. A young woman named Sarah Jenkins, who ran the company's tech division, hesitated, looking from Julian's desperate face to Ilara's calm one. "Aye," she whispered. The final member, a gruff manufacturing head, voted nay. The tally was 5 for removal, 4 against. Caldwell and Julian were yet to vote. "I vote nay," Caldwell announced as expected. The vote was 5 to 5. It all came down to Julian. In a final pathetic act of defiance, he would have to vote to save himself. "Nay," he choked out. The vote was 6 against removal, 5 for. It seemed he had survived by the slimmest of margins. But Caldwell had miscalculated the room. He turned to Ilara. "The motion fails." "You seem to be forgetting the clause under which we are convened, Robert," Ilara said, her voice cutting through his premature victory. "Article 9, Section 4 is explicit. In the event of an emergency vote concerning the chairman is recused from voting. His vote is not valid." Caldwell's face went white as he realized his error. The vote was, in fact, 5 to 5. A perfect tie. A profound, suffocating silence descended upon the boardroom. Every person at the table turned to look at Ilara. The city skyline watched indifferent. In that moment, 100 years of history, a multi-billion-dollar corporation, and the future of the Vance family, all rested on her. Julian stared at her, his eyes now stripped of all anger and arrogance. They were pleading. In them, she saw a flicker of the man she had once loved, the brilliant, charming boy who had promised her the world. He was begging her silently to remember that boy, to remember their life together, their children, to show mercy. Ilara's gaze softened for a fraction of a second. She thought of Liam and Sophia. She was not doing this to destroy their father, but to protect their future from his weakness. He saw mercy as forgiveness. She saw it as saving the legacy he was actively setting on fire. The foundation had to be sound for them. She met his pleading gaze, her expression unyielding. She picked up the Vance family seal. The gold was cool and heavy in her palm, a tangible link to the generations of women who had guarded the family's heart. She was simply the first who had to use it as a weapon. "As per the bylaws invoked," she announced, her voice ringing with absolute finality. "In the event of a tie, the deciding vote is cast by the holder of the family seal." She stood up, holding the seal for all to see. "On the matter of the removal of Julian Vance as chairman," she said, her voice echoing in the silent glass mausoleum, "I, Ilara Vance, cast my vote. For the protection of this company, for the preservation of this family's legacy, and for the future of my children, I vote aye." The word landed with the force of a guillotine. It was done. Julian Vance, the Titan. The visionary crumpled in his chair as if his strings had been cut. He made a small, wounded sound. The spell of his power was broken. Arthur Vance Sr. cleared his throat, his expression grim. "This board recognizes the motion has passed. I will assume the role of interim chairman effective immediately. Our first order of business will be to restore stability and integrity to Vance Holdings. This meeting is adjourned." The board members filed out quickly, murmuring amongst themselves, a palpable sense of relief mixing with the shock. They avoided looking at the man they had just deposed. Only Arthur, Ilara, and Julian remained. Arthur walked to his son. He didn't touch him. "You will clear out your desk," he said, his voice devoid of all warmth. "You will cooperate with the investigation, and you will not speak to the press. Is that understood?" Julian just nodded, staring blankly at the obsidian table. Arthur gave Alara one last look, a look of profound, weary respect, and then he too was gone. Now they were alone, the builder and the architect in the silent monument to their broken marriage. Was it worth it, Alara? Julian finally whispered, his voice raw with a pain she hadn't heard in years. Was destroying me worth it? Alara walked around the table until she stood before him. She looked down at the shattered man who was her husband, and for the first time she allowed the deep, profound hurt she had buried for so long to surface in her eyes. "You were already destroyed, Julian," she said, her voice soft but unforgiving. "You just hadn't hit the ground yet. I didn't destroy you. I just signed the demolition permit." She turned and walked away, her footsteps sure and steady, leaving him alone in the wreckage of the empire he had lost, with nothing but the panoramic view of a city that no longer felt like his. That night marked the fall of a king and the rise of a queen. The story of Alara Vance became a legend whispered in the halls of power, a testament to the fact that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room, but the most resolute mind. She didn't just reclaim her dignity. She seized control of her destiny, proving that the guardian of a family's heart can also be its fiercest protector. Her story is a powerful reminder that betrayal can be a catalyst, and that from the rubble of a broken promise, one can build an unshakable empire of self-worth. If this story of strategy, betrayal, and ultimate vindication resonated with you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who appreciates a story of quiet strength. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell for more tales of intricate drama and powerful real-life events. What would you have done in Alara's position? Let us know in the comments below.
A piercing scream shattered the sterile calm of Lakeview Mercy Hospital, echoing down the pristine white corridors with such intensity that nurses halted mid-step, trays trembling in their hands. It wasn't a cry born from the pains of childbirth alone. It was the raw, visceral anguish of betrayal ripping through Helena St. James's soul. Heavily pregnant and barely able to stand, Helena clutched the cold steel railing for support, her heart hammering in her chest as if it might burst at any moment. Her eyes, bloodshot and rimmed from sleepless nights, stared at the closed door of the VIP suite just ahead, where her millionaire husband, Dominic St. James, had barricaded himself with another woman, Claudette Vernier. The staff watched in horrified disbelief, whispering behind shaking hands as Helena realized the truth she desperately hoped was a lie. Dominic, the father of her unborn child, was here at the hospital, but not for her, not even as her body teetered on the brink of labor. Instead, he remained locked away, comforting another woman who refused to let him leave her side. Only hours earlier, Helena had awoken alone, the penthouse empty once again, the chilling emptiness confirming Dominic had disappeared overnight without a word. Now the shock of his betrayal consumed her, overwhelming the pain of the contractions that tightened around her belly. As hospital staff exchanged worried glances, Helena knew she stood at the edge of a nightmare from which there was no escape. Her husband had chosen to abandon her at the moment she needed him most, in a betrayal that would soon ignite an explosive scandal within these very hospital walls. Are you shocked by Dominic's betrayal as much as Helena? Comment shocked if this opening took your breath away, or saw it coming if you expected Dominic's cruelty. Hours before, Helena's day had begun with promise. She woke before the sun, dreading the possibility of another lonely breakfast at their penthouse dining table. The smell of strong tea and the rising swirl of the city's early traffic had given her a sense of calm, but it vanished once she realized Dominic had slipped out in the middle of the night. Again. For weeks now, he'd been disappearing without explanation, though he left her credit cards and a personal shopper's phone number. She would have traded every piece of fancy jewelry for one morning of his undivided attention. When a stabbing pain tore through her side, she didn't panic at first. She'd been having mild contractions for a few days. Nothing new, but this pain felt heavier, deeper, tugging at her from the inside out. She placed a trembling hand on her belly, whispered promises to her unborn baby that everything would be okay, and dialed for a cab. The driver took one look at Helena's pallor and sped to Lakeview Mercy Hospital, weaving in and out of traffic, all the while reassuring her in a paternal tone. By the time Helena reached the maternity ward, her body was burning up. She clung to the registration counter, chest tight, her breath coming in shallow bursts. Nurses placed her in a wheelchair and swiftly rolled her to an examination room. Monitoring equipment beeped in her ears like an urgent alarm. Then came the biggest shock. She discovered that Dominic had already checked into the hospital, except not for her. He was on another floor with a VIP patient named Claudette Vernier, a woman the nursing staff recognized as an important guest. One nurse tried to downplay it, saying, "He's probably checking on a friend, dear." But Helena knew the truth when she saw the pity in their eyes. This was no casual acquaintance. The staff had witnessed enough to suspect that Dominic's presence was more personal than professional. Outside the exam room, she overheard low voices remarking on how Claudette had demanded a private suite, special meals, and 24/7 access to Dominic, her alleged support system. All while Helena, in the final stage of pregnancy, was left alone. Pause for a moment. Where are you watching from right now? Share your location or just say hello. We're all in this journey together. Before meeting Dominic, Helena had been a dreamer, working part-time at a modest coffee shop while saving tips for night school classes in creative writing. She cherished small joys, baking cookies, reading romance novels on rainy afternoons, and strolling under autumn leaves. Then 5 years ago, Dominic strolled in wearing a well-tailored suit that contrasted vividly with her cafe's humble atmosphere. He ordered an espresso with a shy smile, and from that moment onward, her heart fluttered like a trapped bird. He courted her with an old-world elegance, sending handwritten notes and dropping by her shift with a rose tucked into his pocket. She found it charming rather than ostentatious. The night he took her to a luxurious gala was the first time she saw the realm he inhabited. Glittering gowns, champagne towers, and deals sealed with a nod of the head. She was awestruck, but even more so when he leaned down to whisper in her ear, "All this means nothing without someone genuine to share it with." The sincerity in his eyes made her believe in his goodness. In the beginning, they lived simply in a comfortable apartment where they shared Sunday breakfasts and slow dances in the living room. But as Dominic's business expanded, so did his lifestyle. Suddenly, he was signing million-dollar deals, investing in sprawling resorts, and building a real estate empire under the name St. James Capital. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from bankers, investors, and socialites. Helena tried to acclimate, but she felt out of place at gatherings where guests wore custom suits worth more than her entire wardrobe. When she found out she was pregnant, joy blossomed in her chest, even as she worried that Dominic might not have time for a family. For months, she endured nausea, swelling, and emotional lows. Dominic, though often gone, showed flashes of tenderness, placing his hand on her belly to feel the baby's first flutters. He said he wanted a son, someone he could teach about life and show the world to. Helena felt certain that once the baby arrived, everything would be perfect. But their closeness had become sporadic at best. And now, at Lakeview Mercy Hospital, that distance had grown into an unbridgeable chasm. Curious what you think of Helena's romantic backstory with Dominic. Do you find it captivating or heartbreaking? Comment love story if you think it started sweet, or heartbreak if you saw the red flags from the start. Helena's body tensed with each contraction as Dr. Bennett, a stern yet compassionate obstetrician, entered her room. Concern etched every line of his face. "Your blood pressure is alarmingly high," he told Helena, adjusting the stethoscope around his neck. "We'll need to monitor you closely. If it doesn't stabilize, we'll have to induce labor." His voice was calm, but Helena felt the gravity of his warning sink in. She was only 36 weeks along, borderline preterm. The baby could be in danger if her blood pressure continued to rise. Desperate to have Dominic's support, Helena repeatedly called his phone, only to be redirected to voicemail. She left frantic messages. "I'm in the hospital. They might induce labor. Please come." No response. At one point, a kindly older nurse with graying hair patted Helena's hand and said gently, "Your husband is in the East Wing. He's busy with another patient." Helena's throat constricted. She already knew it was Claudette, but hearing someone else confirm it felt like a painful cut. Although Helena hadn't yet met Claudette face to face, she had gleaned enough from hushed chatter. Claudette Vernier was not just a business associate, she was rumored to hold significant power in the development deals tied to St. James Capital. Some claimed she was an heiress from Europe with her own line of boutique hotels. Others speculated she was a cunning investor with an uncanny knack for taking over major properties. One rumor was universal. Claudette and Dominic were intimately involved. As her contractions intensified, Helena felt an urgent need to confront Dominic. Summoning her last reserves of energy, she disconnected her IV drip, despite the protests of alarmed nurses, and shuffled out into the hallway, pressing a hand to her swollen belly. Each step was torture, but heartbreak fueled her. Eventually, she found the door of Claudette's private suite, guarded by a tall security man in a pristine black suit. When Helena tried to push her way in, the guard gently but firmly stopped her. The door cracked open just enough for Helena to see Dominic's silhouette at Claudette's bedside. The woman draped in a silky robe. She let out a strangled cry. Her husband was close enough to touch, yet oceans away. Take a breath, everyone. Is it too intense or are you hooked? Share your reaction. Comment engrossed if you can't look away, or overwhelmed if it's getting too stressful. Helena's body felt like it was working against her, the stress spiking her blood pressure even higher. Nurses hurried to retrieve her from the corridor, muttering about how she was in no condition to be wandering around. She was escorted back to her room, legs trembling, heart pounding. Dr. Bennett reprimanded her gently but firmly, cautioning that the baby's heart rate was showing signs of distress. Back in bed, strapped to monitoring devices, Helena stared at the hospital ceiling. She clenched her fists, tears streaming silently. It was a quiet meltdown, no loud sobs, just a subdued heartbreak that turned her face into a mask of exhaustion. The monitors beeped incessantly, each note a grim reminder of her precarious health. She refused sedation, wanting to remain alert in case Dominic miraculously appeared. Outside the open door, she heard voices, some of them outraged, some pitying. The entire ward buzzed with the scandal. A millionaire father ignoring his pregnant wife while tending to his business partner upstairs. A young nurse stepped in to check Helena's vitals, her eyes full of sympathy. "We're doing everything we can, Mrs. St. James," she whispered. "Try to stay calm for your baby's sake." Helena nodded weakly, feeling as though her entire life had derailed. Several hours later, as twilight draped the hospital in shadows, Dominic still hadn't appeared. Instead, April Lyman arrived, Helena's close friend who also happened to be a nurse off duty. She had rushed over after hearing the gossip. April was tall and confident, with keen instincts that made her an invaluable ally. She wrapped Helena in a fierce hug. "I've spoken with some of the staff, and they said Dominic is still holed up with Claudette. Apparently she's claiming some sort of stress-induced breakdown." Helena swallowed. "They won't let me see him. Claudette's security stands guard. And Dominic, he hasn't even called me once." She let out a trembling sigh, feeling fury, heartbreak, and sorrow all at once. April's eyes flared with protective anger. "I'm going up there. Let's see if I can talk some sense into him." With that, April turned on her heel, determined to confront the man who was quickly earning the hospital's scorn. In a similar situation, would you confront Dominic yourself or rely on a friend's help? Comment "confront" or "back up" to let us know what you do. Night deepened, and the hospital's fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on every heartbreak unfolding within. Helena shut her eyes, trying to remember the early days of her relationship with Dominic. Memories drifted to the time he taught her to waltz in their tiny living room, the radio humming a soft tune, or the time they danced under a street lamp just because it was raining and they wanted a taste of romance. Those recollections felt like stories from another life. April returned an hour later, her expression bleak. "No luck," she said, collapsing into a chair near Helena's bed. Security wouldn't even let me in the corridor. I could see Dominic at the far end, pacing. He must have spotted me, but he didn't come over. Helena felt a pang as if an invisible string had been cut. She was on the verge of active labor, yet her husband couldn't spare 5 minutes to see if she was okay. Dr. Bennett chose that moment to come in and check Helena's stats. His neutral mask slipped, revealing genuine concern. "We can't prolong this much longer," he said grimly. "Your blood pressure isn't responding to medication as well as we'd hoped, and the baby's heart rate is dropping intermittently. If there's no improvement within the next few hours, we have to induce." Helena nodded, swallowing down panic. Induction meant artificial hormones, stronger contractions, and a likely avalanche of pain. She forced herself to think of the baby first, to muster any trace of courage. "Do whatever is necessary," she whispered. I wish Dominic could be here." Dr. Bennett pressed his lips together and didn't answer. In silence, he adjusted her IV, leaving her alone with April once again. Outside, thunder rumbled faintly. The city was bracing for a storm, one that seemed to mirror Helena's emotional tempest. She felt battered, blindsided by the love that once cradled her and now lay in ruins. If Claudette was truly ill, Helena could empathize with any woman's pain. But how ill could Claudette be if her main focus was blocking Dominic from his pregnant wife? And how could Dominic watch Helena suffer from a distance, choosing not to intervene? Let's take a moment to breathe. Share your thoughts on Claudette's condition. Do you believe it's real or a tactic? Drop a tactic or real deal in the comments. In the earliest hours of the morning, the hospital's overhead lights buzzed softly, casting elongated shadows against the wall. Helena tried to rest but managed only a few minutes of fitful dozing. Each time she closed her eyes, she saw Dominic's face, once tender and full of promise, now cold and distant, overshadowed by Claudette's presence. Her belly cramped, and she breathed through the pain. She could sense her body inching closer to labor. Then came the final blow. April knocked gently on the door and stepped inside, features drawn. Word is that Claudette is demanding Dominic stay with her for the night. She claims she can't cope alone, and the hospital administrators are letting her have her way. She's some kind of VIP donor, it seems. Dominic is telling staff he can't risk leaving Claudette alone right now. Helena stared at April, speechless. She recalled the ring Dominic had slipped on her finger, how it sparkled in the candlelight when he proposed. He'd promised to build a lifetime of memories, to protect her, to be there, in sickness and in health. Now, ironically, in a place meant for healing, he was nowhere near her. Claudette had effectively caged him in a web of emotional manipulation, or maybe it was a web of his own making. Despair coiled in Helena's chest, tightening with each heartbeat. She grabbed her phone and typed a simple message to Dominic, her hands trembling. "I'm in danger of being induced. If you don't come soon, our baby might be born without you." She hit send and waited, the minutes ticking by with excruciating slowness. The only reply was silence. Meanwhile, Dr. Bennett re-entered. His expression told her everything. "We're going to induce labor now," he said softly. The pains had begun in earnest. Her blood pressure was too high, and the baby's vital signs were borderline. Helena nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She handed her phone to April. "If he calls, tell him," her voice cracked. "Just tell him I need him." "We're getting to the heart of this drama. Do you still believe Dominic might rush in at the last second? Show some hope. Comment, hope if yes, or doubt if no." Labor induction in a hospital like Lakeview Mercy was a process both clinical and overwhelming. Dr. Bennett administered the medication that would intensify Helena's contractions, and almost immediately, her body felt trapped in a vice grip of pain. Waves of agony rolled through her abdomen and lower back, each one cresting higher than the last. Her heart raced. She clutched the bed rails, knuckles white. April held her hand, murmuring words of encouragement, while two nurses scurried around, adjusting monitors, checking IV lines, and trying to keep Helena's spirits afloat. Helena had always imagined giving birth in a calm environment. Perhaps Dominic would be seated beside her, massaging her shoulders or whispering reassuring words. They had talked about soothing music playing in the background. Now all she had was the hum of fluorescent lights and the whir of machinery. At times, she wondered if the baby could sense her despair. She whispered quietly to her belly, telling her child, Stay strong for Mama. Hours crawled by, marked by the relentless beep of the fetal heart monitor. The readouts dipped ominously, then climbed again. Dr. Bennett's face remained etched with worry. April texted Dominic repeatedly, leaving voicemails, but no response came. It was as if he'd completely vanished, though everyone in the hospital knew he was just floors away, locked in Claudette's suite. The pain sharpened. Helena cried out, tears streaming, a primal fear burrowing into her mind. What if something went wrong and Dominic only emerged to find them gone? She had never felt so alone, and yet she refused to succumb to hopelessness. April massaged her wrists, gently reminding her of breathing techniques. Sweat drenched Helena's hair, her lungs working overtime to inhale small gulps of air between each contraction. Every so often, Helena's anguish lapsed into a numb haze. But no matter how far her mind drifted, the heartbreak anchored her to reality. Her child's father was choosing to stand by another woman. He wasn't forced. He wasn't coerced. He was making a conscious choice, and that realization crushed any illusions she once held. Your thoughts matter. If you were Helena, how would you cope with this pain? Breathing exercises, silent crying, or something else? Drop your method of coping below. Just when Helena believed she had reached her threshold, the medical team prepared for the final stage of labor. The contractions came closer, nearly merging into one extended wave of torment. Dr. Bennett guided her through each push, maintaining a steady refrain. Deep breaths. Push. Good. One more. April's hands never left Helena's, a beacon of warmth in a sea of cold machinery. In the corridor, footsteps scuffled. Nurses peered in with pitying eyes, but there was no sign of Dominic. Helena tried to block out the image of him cradling Claudette's hand, promising her everything, while she labored alone. Summoning every ounce of her resolve, she poured her heartbreak and fury into the final pushes. Her screams tore through the maternity ward, echoing down white-tiled halls. Then at last came the frantic, miraculous cry of a newborn. Overwhelmed by relief, Helena collapsed back onto the bed. A nurse quickly wiped the baby, wrapping him in a soft blanket. Doctor, Bennett glanced at Helena, his eyes kind, even if overshadowed by exhaustion. You have a son, he said. He's small, but he's breathing well. Tears flooded Helena's eyes. As they handed her the tiny wriggling form, her heart swelled with love so fierce it chased out the darkest corners of betrayal. She touched the baby's downy head, marveling at his perfect, miniature features. This child, Tristan Andrew St. James, was a piece of her soul manifest, and Dominic was missing it all. For a moment, Helena let herself forget Dominic's cruelty, enthralled by the beauty of her son's first moments. His cries quieted as she held him close, his cheek pressing against her chest. She whispered shakily, "We made it, my sweet boy." April brushed away tears of her own. A hush fell on the room, a brief respite from the storm that had raged all night. But heartbreak lingered like a poison. When she gazed into Tristan's eyes, she silently vowed to protect him from the chaos that had enveloped her marriage. Even if Dominic never walked through that door, Helena would be strong enough for them both. We want to hear from you. Who's feeling emotional right now? Hit 3 if you're moved by the birth of baby Tristan, or 4 if you're feeling heartbreak over Dominic's absence. The first night with Tristan was a blur of feedings, checkups, and postpartum pain. Exhausted, Helena drifted in and out of sleep, lulled by the steady beeping of hospital machines. April stayed as late as she could, but eventually had to leave due to hospital policy. In the early hours, Helena woke to see a familiar face by her bedside. Lucia St. James, Dominic's younger sister. Lucia had always been a breath of fresh air in the St. James family, less infatuated with money or status than the rest of them. She approached gingerly, relief and sadness mixing in her expression. "I just found out you'd gone into labor," Lucia said, her voice trembling. "I had to push through Claudette's ridiculous security detail to get here. Dominic was there, but he wouldn't listen to me." Shame burned Helena's cheeks. She'd never wanted anyone to witness the breakdown of her marriage like this. "He didn't come," she murmured, looking down at Tristan. "He stayed with her while I—" Her words trailed off and tears threatened to return. Lucia's eyes misted over as she gently touched her nephew's tiny hand. "You deserved better," she said. bitterness coloring her tone. I told Dominic he's betraying his family. He just gave me this vacant look and said, I have obligations to Claudette. She's crucial to our projects. Lucia exhaled sharply, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Business be damned. How can he value deals over his wife and son? Helena had no answer. The avalanche of revelations in the past 24 hours convinced her that Dominic was already gone, emotionally, if not physically. Lucia handed Helena a business card for a friend who was a divorce attorney, though her voice shook. I don't want to push you toward anything, but you need to protect yourself. If Dominic is this far gone, Claudette might have her claws deep into the family fortune. Tristan stirred in Helena's arms, a tiny whimper that broke her heart anew. One day he would ask about his father, and she'd have to find the words to explain. For now, she kissed her son's forehead and held him closer, tears falling on his blanket. Time for a quick poll. Should Lucia keep pressuring Dominic? Or should she shift all her support to Helena? Write pressure him or support her in the comments. Over the next day, Helena recuperated slowly, overshadowed by an endless, hollow ache. Physically, she was drained from childbirth. Emotionally, she was numb with grief. Tristan underwent standard newborn tests, passing them with mostly positive results. Dr. Bennett was cautiously optimistic about Helena's blood pressure returning to a manageable level, but insisted on another day or two of observation. The hospital's corridors continued to buzz with gossip. April heard it all, how Claudette was recovering from an alleged breakdown, though no one could specify the nature of her ailment. Dominic paced in and out of her suite, ignoring staff suggestions that he at least acknowledge Helena's condition. A few outraged nurses whispered that if it weren't for his hefty donations to the hospital, he'd be evicted outright for such callous behavior. During feeding sessions, Helena would cradle Tristan against her, cooing softly in his ear to drown out her thoughts of Dominic. The image of her husband with another woman, closeted in the same building, gnawed at her sanity. She found herself oscillating between heartbreak and fury, sometimes on the verge of sobbing uncontrollably, other times wanting to storm Claudette's suite and demand answers. But she was too weak to fight physically, and she suspected that neither Dominic nor Claudette cared about her pleas. Meanwhile, Lucia periodically dropped by to check on Helena and baby Tristan, offering encouraging words and help with small chores like tidying up the hospital room. She promised to speak to Dominic again, but Helena could see the doubt in Lucia's eyes. Dominic's devotion to Claudette seemed unwavering. That evening, as the sky outside turned a dim purple, Helena composed a text to Dominic. This is your son's second night in the world, and he hasn't met his father. If you have even the slightest love left for us, come see him. She pressed send, her heart pounding in her chest. Yet again, minutes turned into hours without so much as a single beep from her phone. Eventually, she set it aside and tried to focus on her infant's soft breathing, praying for the strength to move forward if Dominic never responded. We're almost halfway there. How's everyone holding up? Show your support for Helena by commenting, "Stay strong, Helena." On the third morning after Tristan's birth, Helena found herself in the awkward position of finalizing discharge paperwork. Dr. Bennett believed she was stable enough to go home, albeit with strict instructions to rest and monitor her blood pressure. But home meant the penthouse she shared with Dominic, a place she dreaded returning to, especially if he still refused to face his responsibilities. To her surprise, the hospital had arranged a small press conference in the main lobby. Word had leaked to a local blogger that Dominic St. James was ensnared in a scandalous situation involving two hospital patients, his pregnant wife and an alleged mistress. Swarms of reporters gathered around the double-glass doors, cameras flashing. Helena shrank back, not wanting any part of this media circus. April, protective as ever, appeared with a borrowed hospital scrubs jacket to drape over Helena's shoulders and shield her from the cameras. "We'll slip you out through a side entrance," she whispered, gesturing to a service corridor. Lucia also arrived carrying Tristan in his car seat, carefully bundling the baby against the chilly morning air. Before they managed to depart, though, a shout pierced the hallway. One of the reporters recognized Helena and started snapping photos. A flurry of shutters followed, capturing her pale, exhausted face. April and Lucia created a makeshift barrier, rushing Helena and Tristan through the corridor. Questions echoed in the background. Is it true Mr. St. James stayed with another woman? Will you file for divorce? Do you have any comment on Claudette Vernier's condition? Helena said nothing, holding her baby close. She had no energy to engage in a public spectacle. Her soul already felt shredded. She didn't need the media turning her heartbreak into headline fodder. Once outside, they dashed to the parking area, where a modest sedan waited, borrowed from a friend so it wouldn't draw attention. Lucia placed Tristan's car seat gently in the back. Helena slid into the passenger seat, her hands shaking from adrenaline. April settled behind the wheel. With cameras still flashing in the distance, they pulled away, leaving the hospital's swirling chaos behind. Feeling the tension, let us know if you'd handle the press differently. Drop face them or avoid them in the comments. The drive to Helena's penthouse was spent in contemplative silence. April navigated the early traffic, shooting occasional glances at Helena's hollow expression. Lucia sat in the back seat next to Tristan, humming a lullaby under her breath whenever he fussed. No one dared to speak about Dominic, though he loomed in their minds like a menacing specter. Eventually, they arrived at the towering glass structure that Helena had once been proud to call home. It boasted a grand lobby with marble floors and an on-site concierge who always greeted them by name. Yet stepping inside now felt eerie, a strange mixture of familiarity and dread. Helena wasn't sure if Dominic would be there or if he was still holed up with Claudette. She half wished she could turn around and flee. The concierge, a polite older gentleman with silver hair, took one look at Helena and murmured, "Mrs. St. James, I'm so sorry." He trailed off, clearly aware of the scandal. Helena nodded, tears pricking her eyes as she quickly moved toward the private elevator. Once inside, she clutched Tristan's carrier, her heart hammering. If Dominic was home, would he even offer a shred of remorse? When the elevator doors slid open into the penthouse foyer, Helena was greeted by silence. The place was spotless, thanks to the housekeeping service, but it felt dead. No sign of Dominic, no soft music or welcoming scents. Lucia and April followed her in, switching on lights to dispel the dimness of the large living space. The sweeping view of the city's skyline through the floor-to-ceiling windows felt almost mocking, a postcard of wealth that now resembled a prison tower. "It doesn't look like he's been here," Lucia said gently, peering into the study and the lounge. Meanwhile, April checked the bedrooms. "No sign of him at all. A pile of mail is stacked by the door," she called out. Helena inhaled shakily. She had half hoped he'd be waiting, contrite and desperate to make amends. But Dominic remained absent. Lucia turned to Helena, voice soft. "What do you want to do now? You can't be alone here." Her eyes darted to Tristan, whose tiny mouth yawned in contentment. "At least not until you're sure you can handle it. Let us know. Would you leave the penthouse behind or try to make it your own safe space? Share leave or reclaim in the comments." Helena sank onto the plush sofa, feeling as though the cushions might swallow her whole. Everywhere she looked, she saw traces of Dominic's existence. The whiskey glass on the coffee table, the sleek business magazines stacked by the fireplace, and the expensive suits hanging in the hall closet. Memories flooded back. Him teaching her how to golf at a private course, him surprising her with spontaneous weekend getaways. It hurt worse than any physical pain. April and Lucia gently set Tristan's carrier by the sofa, and he began to whimper. Helena lifted him out, holding him to her chest. The baby's warmth grounded her. In that moment, she decided that even though her marriage lay in tatters, her son would be the center of her universe. She kissed his forehead, letting the baby's soft cooing soothe her frayed nerves. Over the next hour, Lucia helped sort through the neglected mail, while April prepared something light for Helena to eat. They spoke in hushed tones, tiptoeing around the subject of divorce, uncertain of Helena's emotional readiness. The TV on the wall remained off, though Helena knew if she turned it on, she might see sensationalized headlines about her personal tragedy. She refused to feed that voyeurism. "Helena," Lucia began delicately, "I know you're drained, but we need to figure out your next steps. I'm worried Dominic could be manipulated by Claudette into signing over assets, or who knows what else. If you're serious about separating—" "I am," Helena interjected softly, though her voice shook with residual pain. "I refuse to stay in a sham marriage. He chose her over me when I was in labor. That's not love." She paused, inhaling tremulously. "But I need time to gather my strength. Right now, Tristan needs me more than anything." Tears welled in Lucia's eyes, and she nodded. April joined them, offering a mug of warm tea to Helena. "We'll help you every step of the way," she promised. Outside, the city lights flickered as dusk approached once more, a glimmering reminder that even in darkness, life went on. Mid-episode reflection. Are you proud of Helena's resolve, or do you think she should fight Dominic harder? Send proud if you admire her strength, or fight if you challenge him more. As night fell, Lucia left to handle some family business, vowing to return first thing in the morning. April decided to stay the night on Helena's couch. They kept the living room lamps dim and took turns tending to Tristan's cries for feeding and diaper changes. In the subdued hush of after midnight, Helena found herself alone with her thoughts again. She stared out the window at the sprawling cityscape, twinkling towers and neon signs. Somewhere out there, Dominic and Claudette might be together, forging a path that left Helena behind as collateral damage. When the day broke, Helena woke to gentle sunlight filtering through the curtains, discovering a series of missed calls on her phone. Hope leaped in her chest for a fleeting instant. Maybe Dominic had come to his senses, but the call log showed an unfamiliar number. She dialed back only to be greeted by an assistant at St. James Capitol. "Ms. St. James, this is Ms. Vernier's office calling. Claudette wishes to inform you that Dominic will be unreachable for the next few days due to urgent business negotiations overseas." Helena's mouth went dry. Overseas? That meant Dominic had possibly left the country without even telling her. "When did he leave?" she whispered, voice trembling. The assistant hesitated before replying. "Last night, Ms. Vernier arranged a private jet. I believe they're in Monaco by now." Rage, heartbreak, and betrayal coalesced in Helena's stomach like hot coals. She hung up abruptly, struggling to breathe. Dominic had whisked Claudette away to Europe, ignoring the child he'd left behind. April, awakened by Helena's distressed posture, placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. "What's wrong?" Helena relayed the news, a new wave of tears stinging her eyes. "He's gone. Just like that. He didn't even see our son." Her voice cracked on the last word. April's features hardened in anger. "He's a fool," she spat, hugging Helena. "And one day, he'll realize what he lost." In the days that followed, Helena moved through her tasks in a daze, feeding Tristan, catching fleeting naps, and calling an attorney to set up an appointment. Meanwhile, Dominic's social media posts with Claudette began surfacing, painting the image of a glamorous business trip along the French Riviera. Heartbroken for Helena or furious at Dominic? Drop heartbroken or furious in the comments. Reaching her limit, Helena decided she couldn't stay in the penthouse any longer. Each gleaming surface was a reminder of Dominic's betrayal, and she felt uneasy about the possibility of him returning unexpectedly. Gathering a few essentials for herself and Tristan, Helena made the choice to temporarily move in with her mother, Margaret Coleman. Margaret had been Helena's rock during childhood. A fiercely independent woman, she had raised Helena alone on a tight budget, teaching her the values of hard work and unwavering self-respect. "I always have a room for you," Margaret said softly as she welcomed Helena and Tristan into her small, cozy house. It smelled of fresh bread and lavender, a comforting contrast to the cold opulence Helena was used to. April helped transfer Helena's belongings, carefully packing Tristan's newborn outfits, diapers, and Helena's comfortable maternity clothes. Lucia managed the administrative side, alerting the doorman at the penthouse that Helena would be away indefinitely and that any mail should be forwarded to Margaret's address. By the time everything was settled, Helena sank onto her mother's worn couch, Tristan cradled in her arms, tears of relief mingling with her heartbreak. Margaret made them tea, gently stroking Helena's hair as she once did when Helena was a child. "You're safe here," Margaret whispered. "Take time to heal. You don't have to make any decisions you're not ready for." In response, Helena clutched Tristan closer, grateful for this lifeline. The days at Margaret's house were quieter, though Helena's sorrow was far from resolved. At night, she sometimes startled awake from nightmares of Dominic boarding planes with Claudette, leaving her permanently behind. But each dawn brought the new sound of Tristan's soft cries, reminding Helena that she had a future to fight for. She took him on short walks around her old neighborhood, breathing in the familiar sense of home. Some neighbors recognized her, offering warm smiles and well wishes, though they clearly sensed her turmoil. Time for another engagement check. Do you think Helena will find peace at her mother's, or will she face new struggles? Comment peace if you foresee calm days ahead, or struggle if the challenges are just beginning. As Helena settled into Margaret's home, she began examining her legal options more seriously. Her appointment with an attorney, Patricia Beckford, was set for the following Monday. Helena spent sleepless nights scribbling notes, recalling each instance of Dominic's negligence and betrayal, anything that might be relevant in court. She jotted down Claudette's suspicious hold on him, the fiasco at the hospital, the rumored business dealings. Between caring for Tristan and consulting with Margaret, Helena's mind churned incessantly. Despite everything, she still felt shards of love for Dominic, familiar pangs that rose when she remembered their gentle moments. But whenever those memories threatened to make her waver, she recalled the hospital corridor and how he'd refused to even look at her. She reminded herself that Dominic had chosen to leave for Monaco, of all places, just after their son was born. On Sunday afternoon, Lucia called with fresh news. Dominic's overseas trip isn't just a vacation. He's signing major property deals with Claudette's connections. Apparently, Claudette's father is a top investor in luxury resorts. I have no doubt she's pushing him to finalize everything in her favor. Helena's heart sank, though she wasn't surprised. It's like a hostile takeover, Lucia added grimly. He's letting her carve out chunks of St. James' capital. If you ever needed proof that she's controlling him, this is it. Helena cradled the phone between her ear and shoulder, stroking Tristan's tiny back as he dozed. I won't let him or Claudette walk all over me anymore, she said firmly. That spark of defiance was new, an ember igniting in the ashes of her heartbreak. Early Monday morning, April swung by in her car to drive Helena and Tristan to the law office. Patricia Beckford was a sharp-eyed professional, exuding quiet confidence. She looked over Helena's notes, arching an eyebrow at the level of detail. If these allegations hold up, you have a strong case for custody and financial compensation. But I need to warn you, divorcing someone with Dominic's wealth won't be easy. His lawyers may fight tooth and nail. Helena's stomach twisted in knots, but she breathed out slowly. I'm prepared, she replied, voice quivering yet resolute. Whatever it takes, I'll protect my son. Legal battles can be tough. Would you hire a top-notch lawyer or try mediation first? Let us know with Lawyer Up or Mediate in the comments. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal paperwork, phone calls, and emotional upheaval. Helena discovered that many of Dominic's personal accounts were tied up in joint ventures with Claudette. Some deals were structured in obscure ways, likely to obscure the flow of money. Patricia assured Helena that the courts generally favored the well-being of a child in custody disputes, but Dominic's resources could prolong the fight. Meanwhile, the media narrative shifted in Helena's favor. Journalists, once enthralled by the sensational story of a millionaire caught between two women, started painting Helena as a sympathetic figure. Headlines read, "Abandoned wife fights for newborn's rights," and "Mother's silent agony while mogul pursues fortune abroad." Helena granted one discreet interview to a reputable publication, carefully sharing only the bare facts to avoid further emotional trauma. The outpouring of public support surprised her. She received messages from strangers who sympathized, offering stories of their own heartbreak and resilience. Throughout this, Tristan was her beacon, his milky breath, his tiny fists curling around her fingers, and his bright eyes gave her the resolve to keep fighting. Margaret's small house echoed with new life, baby coos, the rocking of a bassinet, and occasional meltdown cries at 3 a.m. Helena relished every moment, even as fatigue weighed on her. She'd read once that heartbreak can be overshadowed by the fierce love for a child, and it felt true. However, one quiet morning, Helena's phone vibrated with an incoming international call. It was Dominic. She hesitated, heart thudding, before answering. His voice came across faintly, as if from a distant world. "Helena," he said, sounding both weary and defensive. "We need to talk. This has gone on too long." "Fern," she clenched her teeth, a flurry of emotions warring within. "I agree," she managed, struggling to keep her voice steady. "But maybe you should have thought of that before abandoning me in the hospital." Dominic sighed, the static in the line hinting at an expensive phone connection. "Look, Claudette's been unwell. I had no choice." Helena could barely contain her anger. "You always have a choice, Dominic, and you made yours." Then with a trembling hand, she ended the call. Moments like these are tough. Would you have stayed on the line or hung up too? Comment stay if you'd hear him out, or hang up if you'd cut it short. A few days after that brief, tense call, a letter from Dominic's legal team arrived at Margaret's house. It contained a settlement offer, a lump sum of money, ongoing child support, and a confidentiality agreement that Helena wouldn't publicly disparage Dominic or Claudette. The document presented it as a fair resolution to minimize stress for all parties. But reading between the lines, Helena saw it for what it was: hush money to ensure she wouldn't air more humiliating details. Her hands shook as she passed the letter to Patricia, who scanned it and pursed her lips. They're trying to end this quietly, with minimal damage to Dominic's brand, Patricia explained. Honestly, you could do better in court, but if you want to avoid a lengthy legal battle, she let the sentence trail off, leaving the decision to Helena. That night, Helena paced the small living room, Tristan dozing peacefully in a portable bassinet. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, knitting while offering moral support. Lucia had dropped in earlier, raging at the settlement's audacity. April had also called, encouraging Helena not to let Dominic off lightly. Yet Helena felt torn. Part of her was exhausted from the emotional trauma, wanting to secure Tristan's future and move on. Another part refused to let Dominic and Claudette skate away with only a dent in their wallets. Sinking onto the couch, Helena reminded herself of the moment in the hospital when she cradled Tristan alone. No father's first touch, no celebratory tears, nothing but the echo of heartbreak. Resolving to stand her ground, she typed a brief message to Patricia. I won't sign. Let's fight for what Tristan and I deserve. The next day, the law office responded with a revised plan to push for a more substantial settlement and guaranteed custody terms. Helena also insisted on a clause preventing Claudette from having any direct influence over Tristan's inheritance. If Dominic refused, they'd take it to trial. She pressed send, and a nervous thrill coursed through her veins. This was a new side of Helena, no longer passive, no longer overshadowed by Dominic's wealth. She was forging her own path, armed with maternal courage. What do you think of Helena's decision? If you support her choice to fight, comment, fight for justice, or if you think she should settle, type secure the deal. Weeks passed, marked by a tug-of-war between lawyers. Dominic remained abroad with Claudette, but the rumor mill suggested cracks in their partnership. Claudette was rumored to be pulling finances from St. James Capital to fund her private projects. Some believed she was making Dominic sign even more binding contracts. If that was the case, Helena realized, he might soon see the true cost of his betrayal. Meanwhile, Helena thrived on the simple life at Margaret's. She found unexpected joy in nightly lullabies for Tristan, in morning strolls where neighbors cooed over the baby, and in the safe, warm presence of her mother's unconditional love. April visited regularly, offering extra help and moral support. Lucia remained loyal, funneling inside information about Dominic's predicament. Finally, after intense negotiations, Dominic's lawyers presented a new settlement far more generous than the initial hush money arrangement. Patricia's eyes gleamed with satisfaction as she explained the details. Helena would receive sole custody unless Dominic demonstrated sustained involvement in Tristan's life. Substantial child support was guaranteed, plus a significant one-time payment that would ensure Tristan's future was secure. In return, Helena would finalize a no-fault divorce, relinquishing any active claims on Dominic's remaining business. Helena studied the paperwork, tears welling in her eyes. This was the official severing of ties, the end of a once enchanting love story. But looking at Tristan, she knew it was the right choice. If Dominic cared enough to rebuild a relationship with his son, the door wasn't locked. He'd just have to walk the long road of earning Helena's trust. Otherwise, Helena would stand on her own 2 feet, supported by her mother, her friends, and her own resilience. In the quiet hush of Margaret's living room, Helena signed the documents with a steady hand. It was done. She released the breath she'd been holding for months, feeling a profound sense of relief washing over her. The heartbreak, the public scandal, and the hospital fiasco were behind her now. Tristan stirred, letting out a gentle cry. Smiling through tears, Helena picked him up and cradled him gently, whispering, "We'll be okay, my love. We have a fresh start ahead." Her final reflection: did Helena make the right call, or should she have demanded more? Share your thoughts. Comment, right call, or more justice below. Thank you for joining us on this harrowing journey through betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimate empowerment. From the jaw-dropping hospital scandal to Helena's resolute fight for her newborn son's future, we witnessed the raw pain of abandonment transform into a testament of a mother's courage. If you found Helena's story moving, share it with someone who needs inspiration. And don't forget to let us know what you think of her final decision. Your voice matters. Stay tuned for more gripping stories that dive deep into the trials of life, love, and loyalty. If you enjoyed this narrative or want to see more long-form drama, be sure to subscribe and leave your comments. Until next time, remember, even in the darkest corridors of despair, the light of resilience can guide you to a brighter tomorrow.